Did you know that the United States has one of the highest imprisonment rates in the world, with over 2.3 million people behind bars? That's a shocking number. Is the federal law system rigged against certain groups, keeping injustice and inequality alive? The truth might be more unsettling than you think. Keep watching to find out the truth. The federal law system in the US is intended to seek justice, but many insist it fails to do so. A tangled network of laws and regulations adjacent to various enforcement procedures make the system regarded as unfair for many people. In this video, we will discuss how people struggle in this environment with a focus on vulnerable groups. We will look at how systematic inequalities play out in legal determinations and how, based on this experience, affected people could experience injustice. The federal law system, a system in justice, enterprise equality, responsibility, and accountability. But what if the society that was meant to protect them has already been infiltrated? Suppose the justice system has been doing justice to the rich rather than serving the cause of the populace, from failing governmental officials to prejudiced decisions. There are many obstacles to overcome when navigating the federal legal system, especially for those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. These challenges highlight a troubling reality. The system may not function equitably for all citizens. One of the most significant issues is biases in law enforcement. Racial and ethnic minorities are treated unfairly. Studies show that these groups are arrested more often and given harsher punishments than white people. This shows that there are deep-rooted biases in the system. These unfair differences not only make things unequal, but also cause people in these communities to lose trust in the justice systems. Another critical challenge is the role of socioeconomic status. Poor families often have a hard time getting good legal help. Rich people can afford skilled lawyers, but those with less money often have to rely on public defenders who are overloaded with cases. This can lead to unfair trials and sentences, punishing people for being poor rather than for what they did wrong. Corruption within the justice system further compounds these issues. In some instances, bribery and favoritism influence legal proceedings, allowing wealthier individuals to evade accountability while those without resources face the full brunt of the law. This corruption undermines the principle of equal justice and fosters a perception that the system served only the privileged. These problems are further compounded by existing systemic problems across the federal law system. Bias and corrupt cases are also types of corruptions that allows the court's decisions to be influenced by boosters of the mighty and wealthy. It has been witnessed that the well-endowed individual enjoys the community to manipulate the system to avoid being punished for misconduct. Meantime, the recipients without power endure the current social order that appears often abusive to them. The above facts demonstrates the pathetic scenario of a system which has failed to deliver on the potential of Operation Payback as a fair and just system. For most of the people, the federal law system is supposed to safeguard citizens, and also the law turns to be a system through which so many are oppressed. These concerns require the kinds of systemic solutions that will reduce prejudicial support, increase effective access to quality legal representation, and punish dishonest public servants. The federal legal system can only begin to restore confidence and perform its role as a foundation of justice for all groups of citizens only if such issues are resolved. The cases of corruption in the federal legal systems are real, and they have equality implications on the provision of justice in the United States. It does not only refer to bribery or dishonest practices, but also races, classes, and power to be unjust to people. This section will discuss where and how through corruption this evidence in the legal system and the racial effects it has, and the findings by the specialists and researchers. The problem of corruption in the federal legal system is closely connected with the racial discrimination of people. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, Black Americans are incarcerated at more than 5 times the rates of white Americans. This startling figure demonstrates that just how unjust the legal system can be. The reasons for this difference are complex. Racial profiling, harsher sentencing, and systemic discrimination play big roles in the overrepresentation of Black Americans in the prison system. A study by Sentencing Project reveals that Black Americans are more likely to be arrested, charged, and convicted than white people for the same offenses. This can be seen in many instances, and in most of this, we can find prejudice from the police, the courts, and the people of the country. For instance, African Americans are incarcerated for petty crimes such as marijuana possession more often than white persons, despite research that indicates white persons use marijuana in higher percentages. Both are biases that unavoidably maintain the racial disparity seen in incarceration rates. But it's not just about arrest rates. People of color are often sentenced more harshly than white people. This can be seen in how sentences are handed down for the same crime. A report by the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, found that Black people are given longer prison sentences than white people, even when they commit similar crimes. These racial disparities are a result of both overt discrimination and hidden biases that have been built into the system over decades. Experts on justice and law enforcement like Andrea Huber from Panel Reform International explain that corruption isn't just about dishonest police officers or bribery. It is about how the whole system can be influenced by unfair practices at different levels. Huber has pointed out that the corruption happens in police stations, prosecutors' offices, and even within the judiciary. This means that from the very first moment someone comes into contact with the law to the final decision in their case, corruption can play a role. When corruption seeps into the legal process, it undermines the fairness that everyone deserves. According to Huber, corruption at every level of justice system leads to unfair treatments of the accused, the convicted, and their families. Sometimes, powerful people use their influence to get favorable treatments, making it harder for everyday people to get a fair trial or sentencing. This is a form of corruption that damages the trust people have in a system, and it contributes to the racial disparities that already exist. Corruption isn't always about financial gain or bribery. It can be about the abuse of power, where people in positions of authority make decisions based on their own personal interest instead of what is right. This can include things like favoritism, ignoring evidence, or making deals behind closed doors. When this happens, it becomes clear that the system isn't truly serving justice. Instead, it serves the interests of those in power, leaving others to suffer. Corruption within the legal system affects the outcome of trials and sentencing. For example, when prosecutors withhold evidence that could help a defendant, or when judges are biased in their decisions, it can lead to innocent people being punished. This type of corruption can result in people being wrongfully convicted and sent to prison, ruining lives and communities. A 2023 report from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, showed that cases of corruption among local government officials have been on the rise, leading to questions about the fairness of federal cases as well. One specific example of corruption that affects fairness is plea bargaining. Plea bargaining is when a defendant agrees to plead guilty to a lesser charge in exchange for a lighter sentence. While this process can save time and money, it can also be used unfairly. In some cases, defendants, especially those from marginalized communities, may be pressured into accepting a plea deal even when they are innocent, just to avoid harsher consequences. This practice can be seen as a form of corruption when prosecutors use it to secure convictions without properly considering the truth of the case. Statistics shows just how widespread corruption is within the federal legal system. In 2023, the Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse (TRAC) reported that there were 334 new convictions for official corruption. This statistic highlights that corruption is not a rare occurrence. Local government officials were involved in a large portion of these cases, suggesting that corruption may not only be happening on a small scale, but also influencing federal cases. It's important to note that not all corruption is reported or caught. Many cases of corruption remain hidden, especially if they involve powerful individuals or institutions. In these cases, the public may never know the full extent of the corruption happening behind closed doors. For instance, there have been instances where prosecutors or police officers were able to avoid punishments for corrupt practices because of their connections or positions within the system. A powerful turning point in understanding the deep-rooted issues within the federal legal system comes from real-life experiences, such as the case of a young black man wrongfully convicted due to an inadequate legal representation and racial bias. He was accused of a crime he didn't commit, with no prior criminal record and merely in the wrong place at the wrong time. During his trial, he faced an overworked defense attorney who failed to present crucial evidence and didn't challenge the prosecution's case. Additionally, racial stereotypes influenced the jury's decisions, leading to a conviction based on the race rather than facts. This man's story is a stark reminder of how systemic flaws affect marginalized individuals. The lack of a strong defense and racial prejudice in the courtroom created an unfair trial with devastating consequences. Unfortunately, his case is not unique. The Innocence Project reports that racial bias significantly contributes to wrongful convictions, with people of color, especially Black and Latino individuals, being more likely to be sentenced for crimes they didn't commit. These systemic issues are further compounded by overworked and underfunded public defenders, as highlighted by the Equal Justice Initiative. This story underscores the urgent need for legal reforms and to ensure equal treatments for all individuals and dismantle the racial biases that persist within the federal legal system. The issue of racial bias within the federal legal system is not just a theoretical concern, but a real ongoing problem that disproportionately impacts Black Americans. As highlighted by the Innocence Project, Black people make up nearly 50% of all exonerees, despite representing only 13% of the U.S. population. This is a glaring example of how racial biases can lead to wrongful convictions and how certain groups, particularly people of color, are more likely to face systemic injustice. One such example is the case of Thomas Haynesworth, a man who was wrongfully convicted of crimes he did not commit. His story was featured in the Netflix series The Innocence Files. Haynesworth's case is part of a larger pattern where Black individuals are frequently convicted due to biased policing practices, lack of proper defense, and systemic racial prejudice. In Haynesworth's case, the justice system failed him, largely because of flawed eyewitness testimony and a lack of adequate legal representation, issues that are common in cases involving racial bias. The Innocence Project looked at 30 studies to see how racism affects police when deciding who to charge with crimes. They found that police sometimes make quick decisions based on mental shortcuts, which can be biased. Some studies tried different methods to help, like asking police to think about reasons why their suspect might be innocent. Others made them look at the evidence in a different way. The research shows that more studies are needed to find ways to reduce these biases and make sure everyone gets fair treatments. Moreover, the Innocent Project points out that the vast majority of individuals it helps exonerates the people of color. 2/3 of the 232 people whose exoneration has been secured by the organization are people of color, with 58% being black. This shows that racial bias is a persistent reality that continues to impact black and brown people at all levels of criminal justice system, rather than merely being a statistical anomaly. The racial disparities go beyond individuals' cases of wrongly convictions. They're deeply rooted in the tools and methods used by law enforcement. The article also highlights the rise bias policing tools, such as crime predicting algorithms. These algorithms, which are used to assess the risk of future crimes and determine bail amounts, are often based on historical crime data that reflects racial biases. Poor neighborhoods, which are often communities of color, are policed more heavily. And this disproportionate focus is reflected in the algorithms. As a result, individuals from these communities are unfairly labeled as higher risk, leading to harsher legal consequences. This systemic bias is not a relic of a past but present-day issue that affects real people like Hainsworth and many others. These stories serve as a stark reminder of how the U.S. legal system continues to fail marginalized communities, and they underscore the urgent needs for reform to eliminate racial bias and ensure equal justice for all. The federal law system in the U.S. has serious problems, especially for people from marginalized communities. Racial biases, differences in wealth, and corruption making it harder for some people to get fair treatments in courts. For example, people of color are often treated unfairly because of their race, and those with less money may not get the same legal help as wealthier people. These issues show how important it is to change the system to everyone, no matter their race or wealth, gets treated equally. It's clear that the law isn't always fair, and that's why we need reforms to make sure the system works for everyone. By understanding these problems, we can work together to push for changes that create a more just and fair legal system for all. We want to hear from you. Share your experiences, thoughts, or any insights you have on challenges within the federal legal system in the comments below. Have you or someone you know faced issues related to racial biases or legal representation? Your story could help shed light on these important topics and start meaningful conversations.